Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What a mess. What we are dealing with today is an abject mess. The Liberals, I have to explain to people who might be watching what's happened and what we're dealing with here today. So the Liberals had a court ruling. There was a court ruling at a lower court that said that something called the first generation limit of citizenship by descent could go on indefinitely. So previously, under our previous Conservative government, we put in place a rule that said if somebody is going to pass down their citizenship to a child born abroad, that they could only do that for one generation. That somebody who obtains citizenship by descent has to have a substantive connection to Canada. And this was done in the late aughts to prevent something called citizenship of convenience, as we saw in cases in the 2000s where Canada was called to evacuate people who had never paid taxes, who had Canadian citizenship, who had never really been in Canada, but had acquired citizenship just through descent. When Canada evacuated some of these people, most of them just went back, okay? So that's why the first generation limit was put in place. And rather than challenge the court ruling, the Liberals were like, yeah, okay, we'll just agree with the court. Now, one of my colleagues, I can't actually believe this, said, well, why would Parliament, why would the government challenge a court ruling? Why would we do that? Well, Parliament is supreme. In fact, the correct answer from the government on that, which is, I can't believe they didn't know this, is that per section 9125 of the Constitution Act, Parliament has the authority to amend the Citizenship Act to impose new restrictions on how citizenship is acquired in our country. And why does Parliament have the right to do that, Mr. Speaker? Why does Parliament have the imperative to do that? Because Canadian citizenship has value. And it shouldn't be appointed judges. It shouldn't be anybody other than duly elected representatives talking about what restrictions we place on how somebody obtains Canadian citizenship. And that's why we have the Citizenship Act. There are actually limits right now and rules for how people can acquire Canadian citizenship. But, Mr. Speaker, about a decade ago, when the Liberals came into power, and on a lot of the far left principles that we see in the NDP, they espouse something called post-nationalism. And this is an ideological belief. And the former Prime Minister actually said this, that there is no national identity in Canada. There's no national identity. There's now a Minister of National Identity in the Liberal Party who said that there's no one way to be Canadian. Then the new Prime Minister said during the election campaign, when asked what does it mean to be Canadian, he said to be not American. So, we're at a juncture in our history, in the country right now, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, where I see, and this should concern all of parliamentarians, our social fabric of our country breaking down because of a decade where we have seen from federal leaders in this country is that concept of post-nationalism, that there is no national identity, that there is no value to our citizenship, that we can just eliminate first-generation rules and allow people to obtain citizenship by descent in a way that is easier than people who have naturalized to this country. So, this is why Conservatives worked with the Bloc Québécois to amend this disastrous chain migration bill at committee. Conservatives put forward some very common sense amendments to try and ensure that people who are obtaining citizenship by descent through this chain migration bill would have to go through the same processes that somebody who is obtaining citizenship through naturalization, so at the very least, we're not creating a two-tier citizenship acquisition system in this country. Okay? So the resolution, or the amendments that we put forward, and I want to thank my Bloc colleagues for working with us and passing these amendments, were very common sense. So we sought to harmonize the residency requirements that somebody has to have to obtain citizenship through naturalization with citizenship by descent. So they have to at least live 3 out of 5 years in order to have the provisions in this bill apply to their descendants. That seems reasonable to me. It's a reasonable amendment. The second thing that we did was we amended the bill to have a language acquisition requirement. the same language acquisition requirement that we require people who want to obtain citizenship through naturalization. The exact same wording that's already in the Citizenship Act. We said, hey, this is reasonable. Why? Because language is a unifier, and language is part of our national identity. There are 2 official languages in Canada. They are very important to what it means to be Canadian. They're actually just integral and core, especially in Quebec, especially in other parts of the country where there is a whole concept of national identity that is firmly entrenched and attached to language. So we made that amendment. It's common sense. It's the same that's already in the Citizenship Act. Then we also said, hey, maybe somebody should have to take a citizenship test. The same requirement that somebody would have to do who wants to naturalize to Canada, that they should take a citizenship test, so that they have to read the citizenship guide and have a basic understanding of what Canada is, what our rules are, and the fact that our national identity needs to be rooted in the fact that we all have a duty, not just privileges associated with citizenship, but responsibilities. And these are things that are taken right from the Citizenship Guide, Mr. Speaker. For example, the requirement to abandon violent and extreme ideology upon coming to Canada. Anybody who is Canadian or who wants to be Canadian must abandon violent and extreme ideology. It's right in the Citizenship Guide. So we amended it to have a citizenship test. The same as what, Mr. Speaker? Somebody who wants to obtain citizenship through naturalization. We also, as my Bloc colleague just raised in a question earlier, we wanted a report to Parliament on how many people have been given citizenship by descent through the fact that the Liberals did not challenge this ruling. They could have challenged this ruling. They chose not to. They chose unlimited citizenship by descent with residency requirements that are weaker than what people who naturalize to this country have to have. You know, I think the reason why I have this so fired up is I have watched through a decade of Liberal post-nationalism, and they haven't just said this, they've operationalized it by eroding our democratic institutions. You know, when you see their catch and release bail policies over the last year and the crime that's wrought on our streets, right? It's the erosion of the justice system. Their censorship bills that they've put in place, the erosion of free speech. These democratic institutions. While we might not agree on certain types of policy or how to get to certain types of outcomes, if those democratic institutions are eroded through a post-national ideology, and we tell the world that our citizenship does not have value by gutting common sense amendment like this, it will further erode the social fabric of our country. And what is the outcome of that? It erodes Canada's pluralism. The only way that pluralism and multiculturalism can exist is through a democracy where you have strong respect for rule of law, strong respect for institutions like freedom of speech, and unifying things like language. So for the Liberals today, mark my words, Speaker, today, for the Liberals to continue their far-left post-nationalism by gutting common sense amendments on things like language requirements, it will only further degrade Canada's pluralism. We're at a moment in history where we have to start restoring the value of Canadian citizenship, not further degrading it, Mr. Speaker. And I beg colleagues to ensure that the amendments that were passed in a multi-partisan way at committee are kept so that we can keep the value of Canadian citizenship and reverse the decade of damage that far-left liberal post-national ideology has done to the value of Canadian citizenship and our pride and national identity. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Question and commentaire. The honourable member for Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Thank you. I thank the member for her speech. She seems to indicate that she said that Parliament is supreme and we should therefore ignore the ruling of the court. I would suggest to her that rather it is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that is supreme, and it is the role of the court to advise parliamentarians when our laws exceed the capacity of the Charter. So I would ask the member to comment on that, please.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The Liberals rolled over on a court ruling. They said that Parliament shouldn't have a debate on this. They allowed the first-generation limit to just be eliminated by a lower court. If they were truly, Parliament is supreme, I cited the act, the part of our laws where we have the right to determine what Canadian citizenship is. And they took that debate away from us. They just said, yep, they had to extend the limit on the court ruling because they had screwed up so badly that they didn't have anything in place to prevent unlimited citizenship by descent. That's preposterous. If they think that the court ruling should not be challenged, then why are we here? Why don't we just give everything to the judges? No.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Gaspésie, Les Îles de la Madeleine, Listegouge. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like my colleague noted, this is a debate about major democratic questions. What is the role of the legislative and the judiciary? The judiciary, these institutions studied what link a Canadian should have to their country if they were born abroad, and we came up with a consensus. That's the job of the legislators. Otherwise, we have a government by judges, and we don't want to see that. I would ask my learned colleague what it says about democracy if the work of a committee is entirely overruled before the bill gets to the House.
I can't wrap my brain around what's happening. We've had members of Parliament stand up in here today and say that we should never, as Parliament, exercise the authority that our constituents have given to us when a court has ruled on something. We have the power to make legislation. We have the power in our charter to overturn court rulings. The Liberals made a deliberate choice not to challenge legislation that speaks to the value of Canadian citizenship and how something so precious can be applied. They essentially eliminated rules for that. That's bananas. That is antithetical to the principle of parliamentary supremacy. And I am so proud to stand here and say Canadian citizenship has value. It's worth having this debate in the House of Commons. I believe there should be a language requirement. I believe there should be security checks. I believe that there should be a citizenship test. And anybody who doesn't, they need to give their head a shake.
Comments, the Honourable Member for Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from Nose Hill for the passion and the knowledge that she brings to this debate. And my question is why? She just touched on, there's so much value to Canadian citizenship that's recognized around the world. Why do we want to cheapen it? Why does this government want to cheapen it, Mr. Speaker?
Calgary Nose Hill.
Over the last decade, we've heard a lot about what Canada can give to the world. We had the Citizenship and Immigration Department tweet essentially that Canada's the walk-in clinic for the world last week. It's about time this place starts talking about what the responsibilities are of being a citizen as well. Respect for rule of law, upholding freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, right to worship without persecution, Mr. Speaker, or fear. And those things are a threat right now, and it's because of 10 years of this government erasing our national symbols, saying that in order for us to move forward, we have to constantly and just wallow in the past. I'm not saying that there aren't things that we shouldn't be correcting, but if we are not talking about the responsibilities associated with citizenship, our pluralism will not survive.
For a brief question, member for Vancouver East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, the reason why we're here is because the Conservatives, more than a decade ago, brought in a law that is in violation of the Charter. I know the member is a feminist, and you know who this violation hits the most? Women. That's what the court found. So if we stand with women and their rights, why would we not ensure these amendments are passed?
Member for Calgary Nose Hill, a very brief answer.
Why? Well, because the member opposite is so radically far left and so post-national that she believes that people who get citizenship by descent should not have to take a citizenship test, which includes things like female genital mutilation is a barbaric practice, or that people need to reject violent and extreme ideology. They are heckling at me for the...
Order. Resuming debate. Reprise du débat. On a député.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Gaspésie.